Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are having a fantastic day. I know it's been a while. It's been gone for almost, I think 8, 9 months now. And I do apologize about that. Life was pretty chaotic and very busy. And I don't know, I just got a lot of stuff on hand that kept me away from YouTube channel for a while. But it wasn't bad. It was good stuff. So no worries. And thank you guys for those that stuck around, and for those that didn't, I completely understand. But I couldn't help myself but record a video at this point. And I do plan on making more videos now as we get into the fall and winter, because that's usually when I like making the most videos, and that seems to be when people like watching them the most. So today we'll be just going over a simple Enso outlook, like in the good old days. I mean, I've been doing these videos for I think 6 to 7, probably even more years since I was in high school. And basically what we have going on is a neutral right now. As you can see, we were in an El Nino, a pretty strong one. We briefly touched 2.0 from November, December, January of last winter. It was a pretty mild winter. There were a few extremes in some parts of the country, but nothing really extreme. And notice that we did have from 2020 to 2021, 2022, 2023, we had all La Niñas, 3 in a row. And it looks like we will be having one again. And if you remember these years, they all were pretty characterized by extreme weather, but they were different. Each one of them was different. For example, my area here in Chicago, for each one of these years, got different amounts of snow, right? I mean, we got a ton of snow for the first La Niña winter. The second, in the middle one, we got less, and in the last one, we got even less so. But each one of them had either extreme cold, snow, and just weird weather events around pretty much just around everywhere. If you remember, La Nina, the one that happened in 2022, 2023, blasted California with tons of record snow and cold for a La Nina year that was unprecedented. And it was a good thing overall. It busted them out of the drought, but it definitely put a ton of pressure on the infrastructure and damaged some areas irreversibly, and even brought back a dead lake from its pretty much was gone for tens of years, and it came back because of all the water they had. But basically, we are in the neutral right now. You can see the El Nino has gone away, and the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center, the ENSO outlook, you can see that they are stating that a La Nina is favored to emerge during September through November of this upcoming fall. So right now it is October, so it very well may be already a La Nina at this point. They kind of usually assess that a little backwards looking, but usually within a month, or probably even within a month from now on, we will either know that we are in a La Nina now, or we will be in a La Nina then. And you can see that the probabilities are pretty high. I mean, they go as high as, I would say, 82, 83% there, especially for the November, December, January, February time. By springtime, so you can see potentially February, and then even maybe into March, we're going to be seeing a more of a La Nina neutral existence, which you could see in the past. This would probably be the most similar to 2022, 2023, where the La Nina kind of went away pretty quickly. But again, that does not mean that this winter will be comparable to this one, just because the La Nina is going to be behaving somewhat similarly. It might, but it's not necessarily something to base our our forecast off of. And I'll have a more in-depth, video on what I think will be going on this upcoming winter. This video is just more describing of what's happening, and some of you in the weather community probably are already familiar with the fact that we have a La Nina going in, but I thought I'd make a video about this regardless. And you could see that there could be a increasing chance of a El Nino, but especially a neutral into spring and summer of next year, and that makes sense, as a El Nino is probably gonna be creeping up into the upcoming year. We'll see, though. We haven't had a neutral winter in a very long time. So do notice that we have the little models right now predicting. So this is basically a graph of where you could see that the temperature in terms of Celsius is ranging from negative 2.5 to positive 3. So these are measured in Celsius, and a La Nina is, for those that don't know, is when there is a half a degree Celsius or cooler temperature anomaly in the Pacific waters near off the coast of Peru. And if it's cooler by half a Celsius, it's a La Nina, and if it's warmer by half a Celsius or more, it's an El Nino, and anywhere in between, it's neutral. So you can see most models are predicting a weak to moderate La Nina, anywhere from 0.5 to 1, some reaching 1.5 here on this Climate Prediction Center models. There's one that's an outlier showing a 2.5. Unlikely, but it is something to monitor, if it's going to be a ongoing trend or not. But do notice that here we do have another set of models, and historically this one, this set as opposed to the one up here, I've always looked at more favorably, and it has been more accurate. And you can see that the dashed line is the average of these models, and you can see that it shows all the way down to a degree. So again, not super strong, anywhere from from 0.5 to 1 in the negative side. Obviously for the La Nina, that is a weak La Nina, and we are most likely going to be seeing a weak, in a strong case, maybe a moderate La Nina. So that is important to know. And you can see this is what the waters are looking like right now. At least this is what they're forecasted to be. You can see with that little blue strip, if this was orange, that would be an El Nino. And you can see that La Nina fading throughout this end of the year and into next year. But it does look like this year, at least through the first half of the winter, will most likely be a La Nina. And I do want to show you, this thing is a very long graphic that they always have. Here is a map of the world, and you can see it's a little bit different. It starts from, say, Europe and the Middle East and Eastern Africa, and stretches, placing the Pacific in the middle. And it's done so because this is where, this region, especially where our mouse is right now, is the Enso region where the El Nino or La Nina develops. And whether or not that is warmer by half a degree or cooler, again, as I mentioned, it's either El Nino or La Nina, respectively. And you can see right now it's beginning to cool, but it's still more or less in that mixed phase, which is why we are still in a neutral. And notice all these extremely warm waters off the Gulf of Mexico and into the Gulf of Alaska. Also, especially west of the Gulf of Alaska, extremely warm temperatures there, south of the Bering Sea there. So that is definitely something of note and something that is very interesting. I can make a video on in the future on how that will impact our weather pattern here. But again, so it looks as though a La Nina is on its way, according to the Climate Prediction Center. So what does that mean? Well, that can mean several things. Typically, a La Nina pattern, you can see I've just pulled up an average image that the National Weather Service has released, and this has been, I think most people in the weather community have seen this picture. Usually indicates a blocking high pressure forming in the Gulf of Alaska that sends the polar jet stream racing towards the north because of the fact that a jet stream spins clockwise, so these winds put it up north, and that sends a lot of cold air into especially the northwestern United States, for those Canadians, obviously western Canada, and into southeastern Alaska. Now, this also drives the Pacific jet stream further north than usual, so that produces usually favorable, good snow for the mountainous northwest, and they usually end up with a reasonable snowpack. Not always. Again, each La Nina is different. And we also see typically drier conditions towards the south and west, potentially extending towards into the south and east in some years. But then once you get towards the mid-Atlantic and further north, where these two jet streams kind of start merging, you start seeing usually very wet and warm conditions across the mid-Atlantic, into, say, the northeast, into Michigan, those areas, Ohio, Kentucky, seeing quite a bit of wetter conditions in the typical La Nina winter. Now, I want to show you something really interesting here that the Climate Prediction Center has. I think I may or may not have shown this in the past, but basically this is a bunch of graphics that they have of La Nina temperatures, precipitation, and snow. And basically, you can see there's different images. So this isn't this may take a little bit of interpretation, but I managed to figure it out after a few tries, and I will explain this to you. So, well, if you obviously need any explanation, but just in case you guys do. So, January, February, and March, you can see of La Nina temperature anomalies. So you could see this for November, December, January average, December, January, February, and it's just, every 3 months it rotates by 1 month. So I guess let's start with December, January, February. We're the first full 3 months of winter. And you can see that the anomaly in terms of temperature usually is, as I mentioned, cooler across the northwest, and it's warmer, but not more closer to neutral across the southeast. Not necessarily a heat wave, right? And you can see that here we have the frequency, which is basically how often it occurs during actual La Nina years. And you can see the most consistent cool weather does occur during La Nina across, say, like the northern Midwest and portions of the northwest. So that is something also to note, the frequency. That's why I like showing you this, guys, because it kind of reads into this graph. It doesn't just show you the image. And you can see that here's a trend. So basically, I read into this, and basically what the National Weather Service does here, or I guess in this case the Climate Prediction Center, is that they take the trend of the past, or they take the mean of the, say, whatever this is based off of. I think in this case the last 40 years. Sorry, yeah, all the way back to 1950, so way more than that. But they remove a few of the decades, the oldest decades, and they see where, what has been the trend, the newer trend. And you can see that it's been overall trending warmer across the east-southeast during La Nina winter. So what that tells us is that this graph right here, where it shows a neutral, and say Virginia as not colored versus the more recent La Ninas as warmer, meaning that the recent La Ninas have happened to be warmer across these areas as opposed to the ones way back in the 70s or 80s or 50s or 60s that usually were more cold bias, and that kind of goes in line with the fact that we're seeing an overall warming trend in our world, and these models are showing that. And you can see that there are a few areas, though, in the Midwest there that have actually trended cooler, which is interesting. And notice that this is the frequency of that, and you can see it's been getting a lot more frequent there. Interesting enough, it shows a little bit, well, no, that's just the end. So anywhere you can see the darker, that's more frequent. Anywhere where it's lighter is less frequent. Do note that this is now just a composite and trend, so this just takes in an anomaly and a trend, and you can see that overall we do have cooler temperatures here that do occur, warmer here, especially based on the more recent years, so this is kind of like the full image. And basically, if you don't understand this fully, all you have to know is that Northwest and Northern United States have trended cooler in the past La Ninas, and they have also in general been cooler with La Ninas, so you're most likely to see cool weather. While the further south and the east you go of those areas, or south and west, it gets less iffy because the more recent La Ninas have been warmer, the more recent ones in the past few years, so it's less so certain. Now you can see this is for another 3-month period of January, February, March, and you can see the same thing. What we do have is more cool air, at least based on anomaly, more frequency. The trend is also what's interesting, is a trending cooler towards some of these areas during the last, past La Ninas of the last 10-20 years, as opposed to the older La Ninas. So that means more consistent cold air during La Ninas. But for the southeast, you can see we do have that warming trend, but it's not nearly as profound as in the December, January, February period. And you can see this is the composite and trend laid on top of each other. February, March, and April, which is really interesting. This is the last 3-month average. I'll show you because after that it gets into spring. But you can see still cooler across much of the Northwest and Northern United States. The frequency is definitely high enough, 60-70%, where it's a trend. And you can see that the recent trend of the past La Ninas, the more recent one, has been that it seems as if the La Ninas take kind of longer to show their cool air across the central United States as opposed to the older ones. The older ones maybe were earlier on in the winter, December, November, January, while these ones, according to this, is more of a January, February, March. And you can see it's been trending cooler during those times. And that makes sense because if you think about all the recent Arctic blasts we've had with those past 3 La Ninas of last year, the year before that, and so on, we had a lot more of those cold and active weather patterns in that January, February timeframe as opposed to December. And it always seems that the winter takes longer to get started, but once it's here, it takes longer to go away. That's kind of the trend that there's been going on the last 20-ish years, generally across the United States, not everywhere. And you can see that's a composite and a trend, and it's a pretty clear image of where the cool air is favored to be and where the warm air is favored to be. Now you could do the same thing for the precipitation, right? So La Nina precipitation. So this is including rain and snow. And again, starting December, January, and February, historically, La Ninas have always dropped the most consistently above average across the Northwest, and generally less so across the rest of the United States. A few pockets you can see, maybe Kentucky, Tennessee, especially eastern sections of those states, have been wetter. However, interestingly enough, the more recent La Ninas you can see have been trending wetter during this time of the year as opposed to the older ones. In general, just wetter, and that's been also a thing. Just La Ninas have been dropping a lot more precipitation, which leads to more extremes in weather, either extreme rainfalls, extreme snow, extreme ice, and you can see that the composite plus trend paints a more equal image. Here you would think that, usually La Nina, December, January, and February are, drier months. But if you take a look at this last map, you could see that, especially with that trend, it may not necessarily be the case since the last few or so La Ninas, I don't know exactly how much they cut away from the trend part as opposed to the anomaly part. But the more recent the La Nina, the more likely it is to be wetter for these months of the year. So we'll see whether or not that trend upholds for this upcoming, most likely, La Nina winter. Now, if we go back, we could do this for different months. Again, January, February, March. You could see the anomaly in this case is, in general, all La Niñas, old or new, have been wetter, especially for this mid-south Ohio River Valley area, especially focusing on Kentucky and Tennessee. And you can see the frequency has been a little mixed, but definitely there. It seems to be very consistent, the fact that these areas are usually drier. But funny enough, in 2022, 2023, I believe, was that La Nina year that really blasted portions of California, Nevada, and the West with tons of rain. So that seemed to break that trend that we have here. But you can see it's been also trending relatively wetter, but a little less so than maybe what the composite shows, meaning that maybe January and February and March are a little less wet than, say, the La Niñas of the old days. Regardless, though, it's still firmly in the wet, and it gives us a pretty good view of what may be coming. And you can see also the fact that the Gulf states, Florida and California especially, staying quite a bit drier during your average La Nina. And then the last one I want to show you is February, March, and April. And you can see for this one, again, the composite, wetter across much of the eastern United States, as we have that subtropical jet stream riding up north. We have the cold air bottled up here, so that usually favors less. Cold air is drier, and the trend has been favorable for the wet, so that hasn't been changing really at all. And then a composite plus trend really shows a lot of precipitation here. And I made a video about this last year, that usually La Niñas support big snows, and this is exactly why. You have the cold to the north, a lot of precipitation here, and these snowfalls really usually affect, say, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the Mid-Atlantic, portions of eastern Midwest, even the South, the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic. You've had some really big snowstorms in the past, and these last few La Niñas have been somewhat similar. And we didn't get really any massive ones last time with the last La Niña winter, but I'm pretty sure that there's a heightened chance for that this year based on what I'm seeing. And then they have even one called La Nina Snow, which is very nice of them to do. This is usually pretty hard to extrapolate just from data, but the National Weather Service here with the Climate Prediction Center did this for us, and you can see that for December, January, and February, they don't have the trend and composite. They just have the anomaly, so where it's favored. And you can see that during this early part of the winter, usually Northwest gets a lot of snow, a little less towards the Midwest, some pockets of, a bit more maybe above average, and less so towards New England. Or sorry, a bit more so again towards New England. And as we go back and look at the January, February, March timeframe, you can see that what we do see is quite a bit more, again, snow for the Northwest, the Midwest there, and into the Northeast, while maybe the Southern Plains and the Mid-Atlantic, more of the, Mid-Atlantic to Northeast staying a little drier there on average. Again, each La Nina is different. I just want to show you in this video the averages that come with them. And basically what you're seeing is, again, for the spring, even the springtime, that usually La Nina favors more snow for the north, especially the Northwest and the North New England, and then a bit less towards, say, the Southern Plains, so meaning western Kansas there, eastern Colorado, extreme northern Texas, New Mexico, and maybe into the Mid-Atlantic here a bit less. But, that's not always the case because we've had plenty of large snowstorms that have occurred during La Ninas across the Mid-Atlantic and whatnot, so that remains to be seen. But overall, this is what the trend is. So that's basically all I wanted to show you. I was thinking about making an update on the weather. There obviously was Hurricane Helene, which was destructive, and hundreds of people died at this point, which is a catastrophe. But I usually don't really like making hurricane videos. As I've said in the past, I just don't feel enough expertise to make a video on about them, and they are just too dangerous for me to really potentially lead people into misinformation. And to that this past storm is a show of that, where 100 people died in North Carolina, hundreds of miles away from, say, landfall, but that's the thing with hurricanes. You got to be careful with them. Regardless, other than hurricanes, there does look to be some increased tropical activity across the south and southeast, so there's a potential for other ones. But we will have to see, because everywhere else it seems pretty high and dry. There were some signs that the GFS was showing some more of a system later on, very far out in pretty much model La La Land, October 15th. So that remains to be seen. But most likely that is gonna be, this is gonna change. And for now, nothing crazy really looming for the United States, other than, of course, the tropics potentially with a hurricane, which would be crazy. All right, that's basically it, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next episode. See ya. Bye.